Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health
Hello,
Show.
everybody. Welcome to the Raw Life Show. And today we have a special guest. We have Ellen. Ellen, say hello to the Raw Life audience.
Hello, Raw Life audience. Thanks for having me.
Everybody, I love to interview people that have been successful at eating healthy for a really long time, and the majority of their diet being a raw vegan diet. And I know I have a lot of men on the show all the time, and as my viewers request, why don't you have some women that have been doing this a long time? So Ellen is somebody who I met her maybe 15 years ago, and she was eating raw food back then, and she still is now. So I wanted to catch up with her and have her share her story. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Paul. Looking forward to it.
So tell everybody. So where are you currently at with your diet and your health, and then we'll get into your backstory.
Okay, where I'm currently at, I guess I've just moved to Southern Florida, which is a really nice place for continuing on a high fruit raw path. So for the last 21 years, I've been on this raw path, and about 20 or 19 and a half of those, maybe, I've been on the high fruit path. So my diet currently is mostly fruit. That's where I get most of my calories, mostly sweet fruit. I do eat salads, a little bit of nuts and seeds, tahini, things like that. But mostly I'm just loving the fruit and living in the South, and living simply as much as I can.
Now, where do you move from?
From Michigan. It was very
wow.
cold. Yeah,
That's a big move. Yes.
it was a big
Okay.
move. I moved here just a couple of years ago, so I'm still getting settled here and going back and forth a little bit, but
Now,
loving it.
in terms of family, do you have a family you moved with, or did you move here by yourself?
I moved with my partner of about 7 years, Todd, and my dog, Sadie. And I left my children up in Michigan. They're all grown in their 20s, nearly 30s. I now have a grandson, so I was just in Michigan visiting him. So I'm going to be going back and forth probably for a long time.
Okay, so just doing the math here. So one of your children are in their 20s. So you started this a little after, when your children maybe were babies. You started eating healthier and so on. Has it rubbed off on them at all?
I was living in an intentional co-housing community at the time. My kids were 2, 5, and 8. They're now 23, 26, and 29. And so at the time, yes, they were quite raw with me. I ended up in a divorce a few years later. And so I didn't have a lot of control over their lifestyle because they were living in 2 different households that were quite different in their values. But I homeschooled all my kids, unschooled all my kids for a long time. And so I had them the lion's share of the time, and they ate mostly raw with me. None of them are eating that way now. I'm still kind of, the lone, however strong, voice in the wilderness for them. So they're well educated about it. They are conscious about their food. They're all superior athletes, so they really care about their bodies, and that really helps. But I've really had to let go and let them find their own way out in the big real world. So.
Well, I'm in a similar situation because my children are younger, and I share them with their divorced mom and myself. So the kids go back and forth, and I eat healthy. But I had to make the decision a couple of years ago, which is very difficult, to say, look, I've given them the ideas in their head of what it is to eat healthy, but I have at some point, you got to let your kids make their own choices when it comes to the eating. It's not easy, but at some point you have to. Would you agree?
Yeah, we just hope, I guess, so you probably share this feeling. We hope that we've gotten it under their skin enough that, heaven forbid, they have some kind of health challenge in the future, they will have the wisdom to come home to get through it. And I think they do come back at times. So
there's one lady I know, Karen Ramsey. I don't know if you know her. So
I do know.
I know Karen for a long time in New York, and I known her kids as they were growing up eating very healthy. And I know that when they went away to college, they kind of got away from eating healthy, but thankfully they both came back to it later on. And so it gives us hope, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So tell us, so what happened when you were around maybe 19, 20 years old? What happened that made you decide to change your diet? Right.
Well,
before that, how was your health before that? How was your health growing up?
You're dating me. I did not go raw till I was about 38.
Okay, well, 19 years ago, I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm nearly 60 now.
Yeah. So how was your
19
health growing up to you with 38? How was your health?
So as a child, I thought of myself looking back as a very healthy child, but when I looked a little closer, I remembered that I had ear infections at a level that I was losing my hearing, and so I had a tonsillectomy at age 4.5. Then I had eczema after that and continued to have ear infections. I now attribute that probably to all the dairy we were being fed, which they continued to feed me, not knowing better. But other than that, I was a healthy, athletic, social, well-adjusted child for the most part. Getting into junior high and high school, I started to have, I guess I would call it, emotional issues, depression. I was struggling with it, although I looked good on the outsides. Physical health still okay. Then I had a big skiing accident when I was 18, downhill skiing. I was kind of a wild child and thought I was indestructible, but I found out I wasn't. And I ripped apart my left knee, like completely, like really bad. It all had to be reconstructed, and it's never been the same on that side of my body. But that sent me into about 1.5 years of physical therapy. And I really, took another look at life. And that was the beginning of a sort of deep dive spiritually. It shook me up. It shook things up, shook up what I was able to do with my life, shook up how I looked at things. And then I found yoga. And so I really was spiritually seeking more than anything else. And my health path and my spiritual path have always been just completely intertwined. And so I started then to have other health problems, migraines, jaw, TMJ, spinal issues, back pain, anxiety, horrible insomnia, along with the depression. And through all of this, I was still getting straight A's in college and, looking very good on the outside, but I was struggling pretty deeply inside. I had some suicidal thoughts. I really was dealing with quite a lot mentally and emotionally, but I kept plodding along. And then I had digestive issues. That sent me to medical doctors to, inquire. And I saw several for GERD, severe GERD, and turned out later to be some gallbladder issues and IBS. Not one of the doctors I saw over a course of maybe 10 years ever mentioned what I was eating. In fact, one of them early on said, these digestive problems have nothing to do with anything you're eating. And so in my mind, that didn't make sense. And I started studying nutrition on my own at that point. So that was about 20 years before I discovered a raw vegan path. So I tried a lot of things, from Ayurvedic through the yogis to macrobiotic to vegetarian to vegan. Then I found Dr. McDougall, who recommended a kind of high starch, low fat vegan approach. And once I got the oils out of my diet, I felt a lot better. But then I would plateau every time, and I still, there was something inside of me that primally knew that I could get back to the energy I used to have. So I kept working through it. I was raising 3 kids at this point. I really needed all my energy on board. And then when I was living in this intentional community, I was bringing my own food to our community dinners often. And I would have these big salads, and somebody was watching me and handed me a book it was actually David Wolfe. It was my first true, completely raw food diet book. I stayed up all night reading that, called the number in the back of the book in the morning, got a coach, and the rest is history. I never looked back. I mean, from that day forward, I was on a virtually 100% raw program. I say virtually because nobody can be fully raw in the real world exactly, but
Sure.
for the most part,
Sure.
that's what I was doing from that day forward. And it took me about another 1.5 years until I met Doug Graham and his wife, Rosalind. And they really set me on the fruit-based path. I was feeling pretty good, but I was getting emaciated without getting enough calories. Because remember, my digestive issues prevented me from eating sufficient fats to get the calories. So I was relying on vegetables and tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce and getting probably 900 calories a day, we figured out, which was, less than half of what I needed. So once I started juicing oranges and getting fruit into my diet, I quickly balanced out, and that's been the plan for the last 20 years.
So give us an example of what your diet is. What did you eat yesterday?
Oh, yesterday, I believe I started with a big bowl of watermelon. And then I had some banana ice cream later on. It was a really hot day here. So we, in the Vitamix, just bananas with a little bit of hemp seed and a little bit of green, like a daily greens boost. with some blueberries on top. So that was my banana ice cream. And then later on, I had some cucumbers, tomatoes, and lettuce with a little bit of tahini lemon dressing and some oranges in there before the dinner salad. So that typically what I do is it's generally a mono fruit meal in the morning whenever I'm hungry, and often again in the middle of the day. And then often again later in the day, there'll be a smaller mono fruit meal, like a little pile of oranges, and then I'll have a kind of a salad meal. That's
Okay. And over the years that you've been doing this, have you run into any things that you had to tweak or change, or you've just been doing this consistently all this time?
I would say the main thing that's changed is simplification. It's just been a natural evolution to simplify and to, to really prefer in general the mono fruit meals to anything else. I don't crave greens the way I used to. In the beginning, I could eat a whole bin of spinach every day and a couple of heads of celery. I must have been a bit demineralized, I'm guessing. At some point, I caught up on that, and I eat the greens, but I don't crave them the way I used to. So I have added in a little bit of supplementation over the years. I strictly did not supplement at all for about the first 12 years. Then I met Don Bennett, and he became another mentor of mine. And I, was impressed with the level of research he'd been doing around certain supplements. And so with some testing, I began to supplement with a bit of B12, a bit of iodine. And those are the main ones that I use on any regular basis. And the Daily Greens Boost, which is like a greens mineral. It's a barley grass juice powder supplement.
Or have you, or do you check your blood work at all ever?
I do, not frequently, but every now and then, every few years, I get some kind of check. And, I've tested in the low range of B12. I've never had any negative symptoms with that. And I've never tested out of range. So iodine is fine now. Vitamin D is fine. I did have one interesting finding, which was a little bit of a low reading in vitamin C, which kind of astounded me given how much fruit I eat. And I have to chalk that up to most likely just the low levels of vitamin C in our food supply. Maybe I can improve on growing my own. I'm not sure, but
yeah. How's your stress levels?
That was surprising. Much better recently. I was part of the plan in my move to Florida. When I got a divorce, I was taking care of 3 kids as a single mom, and I was homeschooling them, and I was told I'd have to put them all in school and go to work full time. And I didn't like that idea. And after a few days, I thought of another plan. So I was running businesses at home with my kids for many years. And then I moved on to a big piece of property in the country and invited lots of other people to come and rent from me and live with me. And we put up a big 30-foot yurt and had yoga classes in there and retreats and all kinds of really fun, creative adventures. And yet I was holding up an awful lot for a lot of other people. And as much fun as it was, I began to question the level of stress I was carrying, because I was having some symptoms. When I get stress symptoms, they're usually things like muscle problems, not back pain anymore, but most recently some kind of nerve in my leg. So I started studying tension syndromes, when you're holding tension in your body. And I started really getting back to my mindfulness practices on a daily basis. And moving to Florida has just been wonderful. I live in a small beach town in the warm sunshine. I'm barefoot all day, all the time. I rarely put shoes on. I watch the sun go down over the bay every night. And I can walk and ride my bike almost everywhere I go. So I hardly use a car. And I live pretty simply. So
I love Florida. That's why I'm here too.
The hurricane was so simple, but other than that, it's been really, really lovely here. So
yeah, well, great. I asked about the stress because vitamin C and stress can go hand in hand sometimes. So
yeah, I do take that seriously, and I think that just these last 3 years, although I've been in Florida, the whole world has been under new conditions with politics and COVID and all kinds of things that have been challenged my path with my family members. And so there's been new challenges always. And so learn how to I don't like to say manage, live with stress in a productive way, because it's there. I can't wipe it all away.
Yeah.
But slowing down has helped me more than probably anything else other than the raw diet. So that
Yeah.
combination of slowing down, living mindfully, paying attention all day long to how I'm doing energetically, learning to take responsibility for this sort of energetic frequency that I'm vibing at, what's running through me at any given time. And I have to pause often during the day to just catch myself and notice, how am I carrying myself in this moment and in this moment and in this moment? Because for most of us, we're easily distracted and the stress catches up.
Absolutely.
And I know that living on this fruit-based diet, I'm offering my body a constant opportunity to be cleansing and releasing stress and toxins. And so that gives me a big edge in being able to take on some stress over somebody who's already up to here in stress with the diet, right?
Sure. So what about fasting? Have you fasted over the years?
I have. Most remarkably was the one I did for about a month in Costa Rica under Doug Graham's supervision. That was, I believe, in 2008. That was a profound experience on physical and spiritual levels. I most treasured the spiritual gains I made on that fast, although physically too, it was remarkable. And it was a hard recovery afterwards. That's a long time to fast. It was water only for about 26 days and rest, like pretty much total rest during that time. I came back to multiple businesses and 3 children, jumped right back in a little too quickly. So in hindsight, I would have given myself a month afterwards to just be.
Sure.
And other than that, my perspective on fasting these days, that one was a little bit different, because obviously it was planned in order for me to get down to Costa Rica and be with a group of people at a certain time when there was a supervisor available. But I think of fasting now as something that I do when my body, specifically asks for it. In other words, when I'm not hungry. So if
Sure.
I'm, dealing with something that might come up where my appetite's gone. Doesn't happen very often.
Sure.
But
Now,
body fasting.
I know you get a lot of liquid from the fruit, but do you drink water, and if so, what kind?
I have a little right here right now because I'm talking, and that'll be, I'll drink about a quart of water usually when I first wake up in the mornings. Sometimes a little lemon juice in it, and it comes out of a Berkey filter. So,
Okay.
Anybody can buy those on the Berkey website. It's a really high quality carbon filtration system. That's what I
Make
have.
sure, to you and everybody, a warning about Berkeley, make sure you do that red dye test every 6 months, because those things don't last as long as they say. I'll say that.
That's good to know. I'm actually considering, I have a friend here who she and her husband have a distillation business. I'm actually considering moving in that direction to get a distiller and use the Berkey as a kind of a backup. But
yeah, I've lost faith in my Berkey, and so
yeah, good to I've heard this from, you're not the first person I've heard this from. So
yeah, but okay. So what about exercise? And besides the yoga, do you do any like muscle exercising, calisthenics, or weights, or is it just? I mean, yoga is very calisthenic. It can be, but do you do anything with weights or any other type of exercise?
my exercise program has evolved a lot over the years, from being, just sort of naturally athletic and doing a lot of bike riding and walking and some jogging, although I have this knee, so I didn't do a lot of jogging. But then I got into the yoga, and I was never into the super power yoga model. For me, like I said, it's been as much a spiritual adventure as physical in the yoga. But I did teach and do for many years a kind of slow flow vinyasa program with the typical asanas and the warrior poses and all of that. So recently, over the last 3 years or so, as I was going through some things with my move and a lot of projects at home, and a sort of too big hike in Costa Rica, and I ended up with a nerve issue in one leg, or muscle issue. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it caused me to reevaluate everything I was doing movement wise. And this happens to me every now and then. Something will happen where my body is wanting something different, and I'm open-minded. I like to kind of revisit everything I'm doing and reconsider. And I'm much more in the mode of kind of natural movement these days. In other words, I will really tune in and listen. How does my body want to move today? And I know enough now that, you know, I feel like I have the wisdom to just listen and move with my body. So some stretching, not, you know, almost every day, quite a bit of walking here in Florida. I like to go to parks where I can walk barefoot on the trail the whole way for a few miles, or on the beach. So I'll do that, and some weight training. So I'm actually trying to work back up to where I was before. So right now I'm working with body weight and resistance bands at home, squats and things for upper body, and just working on my own. I don't go to a gym currently.
And,
So
how tall are you and how much do you weigh? If you don't mind
I'm
me
about
asking.
5'6", 120 to 125.
Okay. So you've managed, unlike many people on a raw food diet, even those that eat good amount of calories, to maintain good weight. There are a lot of people, even though they eat good calories, they don't maintain that weight. Why do you think that is?
Well, I can't wait. I mean, this will be a very generalized
Sure.
kind of response because I don't know who we're talking about, but I do know that for me and for many people that I've witnessed and coached along the way, cleaning out the body is important. So a long enough period of time, letting the body naturally, not on any kind of wild programs, but just naturally loosen some of the toxins and the old fat cells, kind of clean house, you know, can take a while. And then being on this fresh fruit primarily diet instead of a lot of raw fats, I believe helps me maintain the weight. It allows my body to operate really more efficiently. And once I got on the high fruit path, my weight rebounded and has stayed quite steady within 5 pounds over 20 years, eating the way I do. So I don't think about food very much. I just eat when I'm hungry. I know what types of food I choose from. I eat whatever is ripe and ready in the moment that's available to me. And I don't tend to overeat. You know, it's just not something that feels good to me. I eat when I'm hungry. So sometimes it's 3 times a day, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's none.
Do you stop at a certain time eating, or no? You'll eat anytime?
Yeah, generally it's been a little bit of a challenge with my partner working full time and coming home late. We'll often share a meal a little bit later than I would have, but generally I eat between, I would say, about 10:30 and 6:30 or 7.
Okay. Okay. Now, what about over the years? I've interviewed a lot of people on a raw food diet. And when I ask them about sleep, some of them tell me they need 8 hours, and some of them tell me, oh, they could get by on 2 or 3 hours. So where are you at? What time do you normally go to bed and get up usually?
Just before I get to that, I'm just remembering reading your book a long, long time ago called The Daylight Diet.
Yes.
Yeah, where you talked about eating just in the daylight. That had an influence on me. So sleep-wise, I'm pretty regular, going to bed around 10:30, 11, waking up around 7, 7:30. I may not get out of bed right away. I actually like to take those transitions rather slowly. I'm not like a jump out of bed and go person. I may be awake, but I'm kind of meditative in the mornings. So I don't generally schedule anything until 10 a.m. or later.
Sure, sure. No, 8 hours a night.
Quiet. Yeah, but 7, 8 hours a night of rest in bed at least, or even 9 hours. I'm probably sleeping about 7.
I think it's
So
very important and healthy and wise. And I see a lot of people that are sleep deprived, but in my opinion, they don't understand that sleeping is when the body's healing. And if we continuously cut that short, we set ourselves up for some bad situations.
well, I hear about a lot of raw fooders, you know, sort of celebrating that they hardly need any sleep anymore. And that has not been the case for me. I think maybe because I tend to you know, need more rest to manage the levels of stress that I perceive in the world. I did find out at some point, was super helpful along my journey to find out that I score kind of off the charts on the highly sensitive person scale. So I've learned that this is something I'm born with, and you know, about at least 20% of us are born with a sort of highly tuned nervous system. And so for those of us like that, we take in a lot of stimulation in any given day. And, you know, we notice lots and lots, and we think about lots of things, and we're constantly processing more than some people who aren't as highly sensitive in that way. And so, that's why I think I need so much downtime to just allow that process to happen, and give myself enough reset time. So I do treasure that, and I keep my life, pretty spacious for that reason. I don't schedule the heck out of my days. I keep them rather slow and spacious, and I do
Sure.
much that way. And yeah.
Great. I know earlier you mentioned you juice some oranges. So where are you on juicing? Do you juice regularly or just every now and
No,
then?
I don't juice regularly. I don't think of it as a major part of my diet. I'm not against having juices. They're delicious. I have a really high quality Nama juicer that I love. And so I will occasionally make some juice, especially if I have guests over and it's a nice sort of pre-dinner thing. Orange juice during especially the winter, especially in Florida where I can get local oranges here, and I'll juice them and put the pulp as much as I can recover into the juice, drink it slowly. That's about it. I don't do a lot of juicing actually.
I haven't used the Nama yet. I hear it's amazing. I haven't
It is,
used
it's
it
really
yet.
cool. It's kind of like almost like a blender, because you put it in like a blender container, and then you turn it on. It's very gentle, has this plastic blade. It's very it gets a lot of juice out in a slow and gentle way, and you can actually walk away while it does its work.
Wow. Yeah, I've been using a Green Star juicer for years and I'm just so used to it. And I hear about the Nama and I'm like, it sounds great, but I'm so used to what I'm doing. But
Well, the other time I might juice is if I just want something, but I am, just eating extra lightly for a little while for whatever reason, then juicing
sure.
can be alternative to the solid food. But generally I'm kind of honestly, I'm kind of lazy in the kitchen. And juicing takes a little bit of work and a little bit of prep to have enough on hand to put through the juicer. And my go-to food is just to open up a piece of fruit.
Sure. Do you find a big difference? I mean, I know you're getting into like freshly grown fruit on the trees because you're in Sarasota now, but how big of a difference do you find from the freshly grown food than from what you could buy in the store?
Well, it's a big difference, and I haven't been able to grow a whole lot myself yet. I've only been here 2 years. We just got in trees about a year ago, so they're not really producing very much yet. However, I'm actually in Englewood, which is a little town south of Sarasota, and we're pretty near a big agricultural area. And so I know some of the farmers who come into town and bring stuff to the market or to the little co-op down the street from me. So I'm able to get most of my greens locally, and most of my any kind of vegetables I eat, I can get locally organic, and some of the fruit. The fruit's a little harder to come by. I'm still, on a mission to meet the farmers, and if I could someday not buy grocery store fruit at all anymore, that would be really worth it.
Absolutely. So what about the challenges or how does it work with your relationship? So is your partner into this at all, or is he completely not into it? And how's that been for you?
Fortunately, yes, when we met, he actually, we met because he came to one of my classes that I was teaching about raw vegan in Ann Arbor, Michigan, because he had had a health crisis and he was looking to improve his health through diet himself already. And he'd actually been vegan for much longer than I had. But he knew he needed to not be a junk food vegan anymore. And then he started looking at raw. And so when we got together, he attended my classes for years before we were together as partners. So he was learning along the way, but still not raw. Then we got together as partners, and he came 6 months later to Costa Rica with me, where I was leading 2 weeks of retreats. And so I told him, I said, you come on this retreat with me, it's all raw, there's nothing else served. And he said, that's fine, I'm okay. And so after he did those 2 weeks raw, he felt so ready that he just said, that's it. And so he hasn't looked back. So he's been raw vegan with me. We eat a little differently. His body can tolerate more fats. He enjoys more fatty foods. He eats a little bit more complex than I do. He's been raw for about 6 years now, alongside me. So that's really nice. It's not a requirement of mine, but it sure does make it easier.
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful.
and I'm glad he came to it on his own. It's never a good idea, I don't think, to try to get your partner to go raw.
Yeah, I agree. Now, do you know people in your area where you moved that are into raw? Do you know people down there?
Well, I knew a few through, do you know about the Woodstock Fruit Festival?
Yes.
So I've been teaching at that since 2011, just the last couple of years since COVID hit, it's gotten more difficult and I haven't gotten there, but I was one of the main teachers there and met a lot of people there over all those 10 years that I was attending. And when I came to Florida, I knew a few people from Woodstock here, a handful. So I set up a Facebook group to help us rotate houses where we would have raw fruit lucks together. And that group just blossomed into about 100 people. And a lot of them are down here. So we do get together. I have a fruit luck at our place about every couple of months, and we usually get about 25 people. And there are I have several Woodstock friends in Fort Myer, about an hour away, who are growing lots and lots of fruit on their acreage. And, you know, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Naples, we're all around here. And over on the other side of the state as well, I'm sure you know. So there's quite a few. I realize, you know, if you stick with this for any length of time, you tend to, if possible, you know, move toward the tropics.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to tell everybody that your website, I'm going to put the link below, but you can tell everyone what it is, but it's Ellen Livingston, and you do coaching for people that want to learn about raw food and just maybe from other things. So why don't you tell everybody a little about your website?
Yeah, I call it mentoring, and I've been doing this for about 15 years or so, and it's evolved over the years. I realized early on that when somebody wants to get on a raw diet, if that's what they want, it tends to kind of open up Pandora's box in terms of their lifestyle and their relationships and their work and where they live, and so it very quickly evolved into more of a focus on emotional, spiritual, psychological counseling, and the food is actually kind of the easy part. But you have to be ready emotionally and in all these other ways, and it will kind of be a fast track expedition into a higher spiritual awakening as well. And so I love that part of the work. And so that's the mentoring, and I'm pretty flexible about how I work with people in that. I was running these retreats in Michigan, then Florida, then Costa Rica for many years. And now I have a smaller, more customized version in my home in Florida. So I can only take up to 4 people at a time. I will take individual people if somebody wants to kind of customize their own situation and come and stay here for a few days or a couple of weeks. I can work with you directly. And see, one more shout out I could give is I just completed a new ebook, which is going to become a paperback soon, called Following Nature Home. The subtitle being Raw Truths Uncovered on My 20-Year Fruitarian Odyssey. So it's a collection of fairly personal essays about life on my path that I hope will be useful to people. And it's premiering right now in a raw vegan bundle with Chris Kendall's group. But then it will be available by itself in a couple of weeks. And so
And they can get that on your website.
You can't yet. You can only get it through the raw vegan bundle. If you write to me, I'll show you how to do that. Or if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get an email about that. But afterwards, it'll be available independently. So
wonderful. Well, I appreciate your time so much. I know you're so busy, and thank you. And everybody, check out Eileen's website. I'll put the link below the video. And this is just another great example of how you can, if you choose to, eat raw vegan diet and thrive. And so
and
great.
remember, I'm actually not so busy on purpose.
Yes.
I'm intentionally not so busy. I really have revolted against the fast-paced world out there, and finding a way to live a little more quietly, a little more spaciously, a little more simply, and a little closer to nature has really been what my journey's been about.
Now that's interesting because you grew up in Michigan, and where you grew up in the city or country?
I grew up in a town of Ann Arbor. It's kind of like a small city.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Ann Arbor. Yes. It was small. Now it's pretty big, right?
Now it's pretty big. And after I had partially raised my kids, after I got a divorce, I eventually found a way to move to the countryside, and I had about 5 acres, and it was really beautiful. And I always wanted to get out to the country, so I finally did it. And then I left that beautiful property to come to Florida because, as beautiful as that was, it was not subtropical. and
Yes.
I really got tired of dealing with the cold.
See,
So.
for me, I'm from New York, fast paced. And even when I
Mm.
came down here to Florida, I still have a hard time getting too far away from the city because I got a fast paced upbringing. So it's nice to get in my yard every day and I look at my fruit trees, but it's also nice that, the store is 5 minutes away and not like all the way in the country
You know, I
roads.
have a really nice blend here in Inglewood because I'm smack in the middle of the tiny little village, like the old village, but we have a whole acre here. So we're kind of private behind fences and forested with pine trees, and it's really nice. And yet I can hear town, I can hear the music, I can walk 3 blocks and be in town. I have friends that are just a block or 2 away from me, and so I'm sort of nestled in the middle of community, but on a private acre. It's kind of a nice
That's really
blend.
nice. That's nice. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, and everybody, if you got comments or questions, post them below, and yeah, check out Eileen's website. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life.